Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke, and our guest tonight is Jamie Belsito, who's running for Congress, running against Seth Moulton as the Democratic nominee for Congress. And if you remember a number of years ago, Seth Moulton, who has been on the show, ran against John Tierney in a primary and beat him. So, Jamie, thank you for coming. Welcome. And why are you running?
I feel that a lot is at stake right now. We've seen a political climate that I myself have never seen before. And what this has done, aside from the obvious of really fracture a lot of family conversation at Thanksgiving time, is show me that there's a real need and emphasis to put the focus back on our district. I think so much of the air in the room has been sucked out on the federal, real high-level things such as impeachment, which is very important from the constitutional standpoint, but really has left the people that live back here in a position of not feeling represented, myself being one of them. And I felt that that called upon me with my experience to say, you know what, I'd love to have that position to represent this district. I'll go for it.
Okay, so number one, Seth Moulton walked out of the State of the Union.
Yes.
Okay, number two, he started running for president.
Yes.
So I guess my question would be, does he really want to represent us?
As far as he's concerned, when it comes to myself and why I'm running, I felt that the district, going back to what I just stated, was not getting the attention that it needs in Washington, D.C. We have 38 communities in this district, I being raised in one of them, Reading. I was born in Wakefield, another one. I bought my first house in Beverly, another one. Started my family here. Now living in Topsfield. That's another district. My mother lives in Wenham. My dad lives in Wilmington. My cousins are in Essex. My aunt and uncle are in Ipswich. My family and friends are throughout this entire district. And my point with that is that each of these communities really need a voice in Washington to address issues that we're seeing: housing, substance use, mental health, education. And so when it comes to what do I want from a representative, I want someone down in Washington who's bringing results back and listening to the people back home. As a parent, as a mother, and as someone who has worked in Washington for about 20 years, such as myself, I come to the district with that experience. I see a huge void of what's being represented for where I grew up and where I'm raising my family. And that, to me, speaks volumes of what we need in a congressional representative.
Now, you were once an independent or unenrolled.
Correct.
Okay. I also am independent or unenrolled. I prefer independent. But and I used to be a Democrat, and then I was a Republican, and I found that I needed some balance. But I found, because I'm a conservative, that the state of Massachusetts is not represented. Because I feel that, and maybe you can address this, we have nine congressmen.
Correct.
They're all
Congress
Democrats.
Congressional representatives, yeah.
For want of a better word, congressmen. You can call it what you like. But I feel that they're all Democrats. And
Yes.
they vote as a block rather than, they don't seem to have independent thought. How will you be different than what we've already discussed?
And thank you, Gail, for the question, because I understand where you're coming from, right? I come from this district, as I stated before, and I want to say 50% of this district are unenrolled.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
And then there's always the standard 30% that you always get that will vote Republican, win, lose, or draw. And you'll also have voters who will vote for a senator like Elizabeth Warren and vote for a governor like Charlie Baker. So there is an independent mindset
Right.
here, correct? there's really not that in Washington. And again, going back to my statement earlier in regards to polarizing the parties at this point in time, that doesn't get stuff done. And so I appreciate what you're stating. I do believe that those unenrolled voters have a very strong voice in this district.
They do.
And anyone down there being Washington is to represent the district back home. If you're voted in as a Democrat, you're to represent Democratic values. If you're voted in as a Republican, you're there to represent Republican values, of which, to be personally, be very honest, I personally don't know what those are at this point anymore. But I'm very clear about what the democratic principles are. And to me, it's what this district represents. Hardworking people, value on education, value on health care, value in seniors, value in people working, a value on the basics. And I think that a strong society is one that's based on healthy children, healthy families, supporting our communities. And so if I'm hearing something different as a Democrat in the House of Representatives, I'd be curious as to what that is. But it seems to me that the resonating voice always is putting our communities first. And I think that voting bloc or not, I think that it's the responsibility of the representative to do what their district wants for them to do and represent in Congress.
So you think that you should go to Washington, but be very aware of what the people in your district in Massachusetts want, because I don't think that's happening here. I think that they get so involved with things like the Green New Deal, with sanctuary cities.
How do you feel about sanctuary cities?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Immigration's the one thing that I've been doing for almost 2 decades, okay? When I left Salem State, I graduated as a Latin American foreign policy major. Now, I always joke, I said, geez, I didn't even know there was another continent outside of Europe until I got to college, right? Because we don't talk about anywhere else well, at least at that point in our education system. And it was very primarily focused on European culture, and even in the college. Now, what I learned from there is this guy named Joe Moakley. I don't know if either of you recall who he was.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I say that because everyone knew who he was. He was a force larger than life. And that was my first mentor out of Salem State, was Joe. And this was a guy who would tell you exactly what it was, and he would stand for things that made sense and mattered. And he had a conscience, and he was a loyal, honorable man. And he went into Central America to help uncover the fact that our government was helping to funnel machinery, guns, into their government to kill their own people under the guise of communism. 30 years later, our quote-unquote border problem is a direct correlation to our faulty foreign policy in Latin America. The folks that are at the border are a direct result of the Reagan era, of the Bush era. These are situations that we created. These folks that are coming here are looking for a better life. They're going to sleep at night thinking to themselves, someone's going to come knock on my door, take my wife, take my kids, and I can't even sleep at night without worrying about what sort of militias or outside forces that my own government can't protect me from. When we start to use words like sanctuary city, which that is what we're using. We're not taking a look at the root cause of how we got here. People coming here to work, we have a declining population right now in the United States. The baby boomers are the largest population that we have. I have 2 children, okay? If somebody told me to have a third, I would say, who's going to pay for it, okay? My grandmother was one of 12. My cousins and I, we're only having 2 kids each. Nobody can afford this anymore. And this is also causing a decline in our population growth. If we have folks who want to come here and work, and we can ID them at the border, give them a retinal scan at the border, adjudicate them at the border, give them a Social Security card at the border, let them start paying taxes above board, let our school systems know their children are coming so that we get adequate funding. The census that's coming up right now, incredibly important that we know every single person that's living in this district. We have to start changing the discourse on what this actually is. This is a result of our failed foreign policies And we need people to come to this country to start adding to what I hopefully may be able to be eligible for, and when it comes time for me to retire, and that's a Social Security system.
Well, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and that's a whole. It's a whole other thing.
Elliot, I want to be on that show. Okay.
But you know, the question is, do we let everybody in, or do we need to have borders? Because
You're only giving half of the equation.
I believe that we can adjudicate people at the border. I don't believe that there needs to be prohibited. There are criminals, if we want to talk about criminals, because that seems to me what I'm picking up from the conversation. There are criminals that were born in this country.
But that doesn't mean we need to add to them by having criminals
all
from
I'm
other
saying
countries
is,
come in.
do we vet people coming in?
We should.
Okay,
but
and
we
not
should be
have
able to do
open
it.
borders.
Of course we should have open borders. Let me tell you, when you watch these shows on Sunday night during the news, right? 60 Minutes or what have you, and they show you that someone dug a channel, you know, an entrance over here in California, all the way into Mexico, or vice versa. There's always a way around it, right? You put your finger in the dike and the water comes out somewhere else. There's always going to be a way for people to figure out how to get into this country, to Canada, where have you, okay? But what our government has failed to do, since I sat with Ted Kennedy in '98 and worked on an immigration policy, is to address the fact that we have 20-year backlogs, okay? That it takes umpteen years
That's right.
to be able to get into this country. My cousin's in Syria, not a great place to live these days, okay? My grandfather's cousin finally got his paperwork called on. And you know why they couldn't come here? Because he was dead.
But what you're saying is,
but
you started this whole conversation with, you know, blaming Reagan, Bush. Now wait a minute.
Blaming, I'm saying
But-
we need to take responsibility for that part.
Okay, but the
you
problem
left
is
out
the
Obama.
responsibility ends with Congress.
He didn't start anything in Central America. I'm trying to look at a systemic, historical perspective of how we got to this situation.
But the question is, it's Congress that's not doing their job.
That's correct. So it's government, it's political will. Do we have political will? I sat in Dick Gephardt's office, okay, before he left, and he was I don't even think he was Speaker of the House at that
he
time.
wasn't.
And it was 12 pages of nurses, farm workers, migrants, high tech, this, that, the other, okay? George Bush was still in office. They shut the lights off in Dick Gephardt's office when he retired. Immigration never got addressed, okay? And that was years ago. And Congress has not wanted to do anything. People went ballistic when it came time for President Obama to say that we're going to let kids who were brought to this country. Okay, and I will point out the last major immigration reform was in 1996. It was split the bill. It was business and it was family, and they said, they, being the government, we will never do this again. It has to be comprehensive. Not one administration has dealt with the comprehensive immigration reform, okay? Right. Which is why when it came time, and I lived in Washington, okay? I lived in Washington for 5 years. There were kids, Washingtonian Magazine did an expose of kids who were graduating from the schools around the Washington, D.C. area, right? Head of the band, head of the student government, head of this, head of that, okay, head of the math, and they all were top of their class. And they couldn't go to school because they found out that when they came here when they were 2, they had no status. That's not doing our society any good when we say, you are our future. You are exactly the type of citizen that we want for this country. But because of X, Y, Z, whatever the issues are, we're not even going to allow you to become a United States citizen or to become a green card holder or to contribute to our society. That, to me, is a failure of our government.
Well,
and
one
that
of the
needs to be
biggest
addressed.
problems with the immigration is that people come here, students, for instance, with a student visa. Once the visa expires, they disappear. We don't know where they go. They don't go back.
But
they
Gail,
stay
you're
here.
talking
There's
about
a
something
lot
that's
of-
that's our
there's a
whole
lot of
system.
well, of course.
And
That's
why
what
wouldn't
we're
you?
talking
Why
about.
wouldn't you want a student to stay here? We have, you know, who the highest
Because we
enrolled amount of
can't-
doctoral students in our United States are right now? Foreign nationals.
They have to be here legally. If they want to stay,
they are
there
here
is
legally.
a process. But once their visa expires, there's a process they have to go through. That's why people who come here legally resent the people that are being allowed to come across the borders because they come here. We don't know where they are. Yes, it's true. And we don't
Gail,
know
I've been doing
who
it for
they
almost
are.
20 years, so I'm going to disagree with some
Well,
of this
I
very
know-
blanket assumptions that you're bringing out here.
But the bottom
This is
line
what
is that
happens.
Congress hasn't done their
They've
job.
done nothing for since 96,
Yeah.
24
Right.
years.
And that's really the bottom line. So,
Yes.
So that, I assume, is something that you as a congressperson, congresswoman, not congressman,
No, not unless something drastically
Whatever.
changes. Yeah.
would work on as a major priority.
That to me is a priority. It's an issue around economics. It's an issue around our education. It's an issue. You go over to Lynn, okay, and I am going to use them as an example. I don't even have to go to Lynn. I can go right down here to Beverly. If we have individuals living in this city and the budget comes up every year and it's $2,400 per head coming out of the U.S. Census that's going to go to Beverly that goes unchecked if, say, 5,000 people don't get counted for, that is an economic issue for the city. It's an issue for the school system, it's an issue for transportation, and it's an
Absolutely.
issue for our
But
infrastructure.
talking about the school system, because to me this is really important. I have two daughter-in-laws who are teachers, okay? One of them is a liberal. And she,
I'm sorry, what is she?
a liberal.
Oh, God, okay, I just want to
Okay.
make sure I heard it.
And, and as liberal as she is, okay?
Maybe that's why I know your last name, Elliot.
It could be
Okay,
too.
yeah.
But as liberal as she is, she thinks allowing kids into her classroom that don't speak English is a bad thing because it's hurting the other kids that are in there. So Massachusetts claims it's one of the best, has some of the best education in the country. Being the best among the worst in the, some of the worst in the world is nothing to brag about. So the question is, by knowing who comes in, shouldn't we teach them English first before we allow them in our schools?
Elliot, if we want to talk about America and all of our greatness, we need to start talking about the fact that education isn't even a constitutional right. It is a state issue. And if our dear president put out a budget the other night, right, where almost 2/3 of it is towards the military. Discretionary spending for our education over the past X amount of years, take a guess at how much we're looking at. 6%.
but what
So
you're
that's
saying-
part of the problem, is that we aren't even getting money funded from the federal government to the state to then go back to educate our
But
kids.
what you're
I
suggesting-
don't have an issue with the fact that there are kids showing up. When I was in school in the 80s, we had Cambodians coming into our very white Reading school system, okay? There were 6 kids who came in from Cambodia. Those kids had an hour of outside lessons every day. This was when I was in first grade, okay? They are still all living here, okay, and are phenomenal members of society, and they all ended up speaking English in a very short amount of time.
My point exactly.
And that also helped them be able to assimilate into our society.
My point exactly. But
Okay.
see, what you're doing is you're suggesting that the more money we spend, the better the education. That's just not true, and it's been proven not to be true. It's how you spend the money that's important.
Right. Do you feel that our when we live in an education system that mandates all of these additional challenges within our educational system right now, right? When we took a look at what we just did with the Student Reform Act, the Student Act, I'm not giving it the appropriate name that just went through the State House, okay? But the amount of unfunded mandates that this state put on the school systems over the years, I think it was like over 70,
Yeah.
okay? Including transportation. And this is part of why the school costs are escalating, okay? Meanwhile, parents like myself or parents like your sons, etc., and I don't know if you have children either, but the onus of, or the financial piece of that ends up falling on our shoulders, where all of our taxes are going up and we're writing checks constantly to the PTO, right? Again, it goes back to education's not even a constitutional right, and then we're supposed to subsidize it as well out of our tax dollars, okay? that there are a lot of there's much more to a blanket statement than meets the eye, and so we have to take a look at. I'm going to go back to the immigration piece. If people are accounted for in this country and they're able to start paying into the system that they consciously want to be a part of, a lot of these issues will go away.
But a lot of issues that we haven't even touched on yet have to do with illegals, as far as allowing them to vote, allowing them to have driver's licenses.
So they can't vote.
We don't.
They can in Massachusetts.
They can vote in local elections.
If
Out in
you've got-
California, they can as well.
Yeah. If you've got according to Galvin, our Secretary of State, if you have a driver's license, then you can vote, and anybody can get a driver's license
That's right.
now.
It's called
so
motor
therefore
voter.
they can vote.
And they go in to get their license, and they're allowed to vote. So I mean, these
Okay.
are things. These are things that
we got to get Bill Galvin on the show because I'm
No,
sure I just
these
saw
are
Bill last
things
week,
that
and I
are
don't think that
happening.
that's what's happening.
these are things that are happening, and these are things we have illegals coming across the border, causing all kinds of problems. We have gangs, MS-13.
MS-13's
Here's
been
one.
here for over 20 years, and we
that
have our own
doesn't-
gang
that
issues in the
doesn't
United
mean
States.
It's right to allow more in, and these people are causing big problems. Not so much here, although they are here, but on the border states, out in California, we have all kinds of problems like that.
So
and
I'm
a
gonna
lot of
ask
it
you-
is caused because we have borders that are not able to be patrolled properly. And then we have the other
That's
issue.
false. Gail, I
Wait a minute.
appreciate that maybe
Hold
that's an
on, hold
emotional
on a minute.
statement, but I don't
no,
believe that that's
it's not an
true.
emotional statement. I've done my homework, believe me. And also we have a problem with ICE, because a lot of times ICE will want people to be detained. People in sanctuary cities say, no, we're not going to detain them, and off they go. They do not cooperate. There needs to be cooperation. I would like to see Congress get together, because before President Trump was elected, the Democrats, including Pelosi and Schumer and the rest of them, all believed in closed borders, in vetting people, in making sure that we don't have the drugs coming across the border with illegals. So that hasn't been addressed. Now that President Trump is in office, they've changed their minds. Oh, we need to have open borders. We can't
so
do
that
that.
discussion's been going on.
Well, it's been going on for a couple of years.
Okay, and when we take a look at the drug issues, the biggest chain of drugs is coming is a northern entry point. Okay, so we're not even talking about the south.
But they're coming in from both sides.
and it's been this way forever,
That
right?
doesn't mean it has to stay that way.
But we're talking over 40 years, so we can't decide that over the past 4 years that now all of a sudden it's an issue.
Well, isn't that what comprehensive immigration is all about?
Is to curtail drug movement?
Is to curtail all of it, to keep it contained, is to make
Is
issues.
is it prohibiting somebody who has a meth lab out in Arizona from creating drugs right here in the United States?
Well, I don't know that they do. All I'm
Okay.
saying is that the drugs are coming
The real
in.
question is, are you willing to work with the current president should he get reelected?
I have more of a question of, is Congress willing, both sides, because we're not just talking about the House, we're
No.
talking about a Senate that doesn't want to move on anything, okay? Right, we have gun reform in the House. They don't want to deal with it in the Senate. We
Is
have
it gun
environmental...
reform or gun control? There's a difference.
Okay. I didn't pass out the words ahead of time,
Yeah.
but there is much we can have a Second Amendment that, as my brother, who is a serving military police officer, says, you want to handle automatic weapons, enroll in the military. We don't need to have the average citizen have access to a militia
But
that
that's-
far out arms our own forces that are here at the Beverly Police
But
Department.
many of the advocates for gun control don't want to just have the automatic weapons. We know because Beto O'Rourke, who was a candidate for president, he wants to confiscate all guns. And there are other Democrats that want to do the same thing. That's why
Right,
there's a
but-
problem. We need to come
there has
together.
to, there needs to be a compromise. We have to have a
Right,
discussion.
what I'm looking for is somebody who is going to work for us. I don't care who the president is. I don't care.
You're right.
I don't care how many Democrats or Republicans are in office. I don't care. The problem that I see is that everybody's forgotten who they work for.
Yeah.
It is a
just
representative of the people, and you
Right.
are elected
That's right.
by the people.
Right. So, just because Trump is president doesn't mean that everything that he does is wrong. And yet, the way the Democrats are behaving, everything he does is wrong.
So
my
okay.
question is, are you willing to work? See, it's like you've got, he says this, she says this. Well, somewhere in the middle is,
Is the truth. Sure.
both people are unhappy, then it works. You know what I mean? Because you're getting something.
Meanwhile, the people back home are the ones who need the help.
We're the ones suffering.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What I'm looking for, and Seth Moulton is not the guy. He's shown that he's not the guy. I'm looking for somebody who's going to work for me, for my family.
And I am too. I want someone to help work for the issues that I have been through. We almost lost our house. We lost our jobs. I got laid off at 8 months pregnant. I couldn't find mental health services. My mother's in senior housing. My brother goes to the VA. My father is a veteran. It's not like it's all of us. It's all of us. And so who wants to take care of these communities? We live in the best place in the world, in my estimation. Okay, I think I think it's the best.
Yep.
I have to interrupt you.
Yes,
because
please.
We're down to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Right. So you've now got about a minute
You have
or
a
so
minute to wrap up.
to tell everybody why we should vote for you.
Well, I'm coming back to the show, that's for sure, because I feel like only a minute's gone by. So
We told you.
I'm happy you want to come back because there's so much more to talk
There
about.
is.
There's a lot to talk about.
there is. It's exciting.
Okay, so we'll book you again.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's fun. Thank you. Okay, tell me when I should talk to myself.
Okay.
Go You have a minute.
So my name is Jamie Zalloway Belsito, and I'm a lifelong resident of the 6th District. I was born here. I grew up here. I'm raising my family here. I'm a product of the public school system. I'm a public university girl. I'm currently a trustee at Salem State, my alma mater. I am an education advocate. Both of my children are in the public school system. I am from a military family. My father's still laying rugs in the floor layers union at 72 years old. My mother resides in senior housing. I believe that there's a lot that needs to be done for the people back here. I've almost lost my house. I've been laid off at 8 months pregnant. I know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night and say to myself, how am I going to pay these bills? How am I going to take care of my kids? How am I going to take care of X, Y, or Z? We don't need these extra stresses when there are options available to take care of our communities back here. The district comes first. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. I come to the district with over 20 years of experience in Congress. I am a hard worker and I am a fighter. And the district that I love and I think is the best place in the world to live in and raise your family in comes first. So I hope you will consider me to be your congressional representative. I will be the hardest working, best congressional representative possible for this district. I wear my heart on my sleeve when it comes to the 6th, and I thank you very much for the consideration. I'm the only Jamie Zalloway Belsito in the United States, so hopefully you'll be able to find my information on the web. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That was a mouthful.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was feisty,
You're
and I want
welcome.
to come back.
Okay.
Good.
I just want to take a minute to have the back of the book segment. We haven't done this for a long time.
You better do it quick.
I'm going to do it quick. I had someone approach me the other day, and we were talking about the impeachment and what it meant and all of that. And they said, well, the president was impeached, but he wasn't exonerated. And I thought, yeah, you're right, he wasn't. So I didn't really know the difference. So I went and I did some research, and I found that anybody who wants to say, well, he wasn't exonerated, so therefore he's guilty. That's not the case at all. You cannot be exonerated unless you have been found guilty of something. So if you have been found guilty, then this is what's happening with prisoners. Sometimes they've been sent to prison and they haven't had the best representation or whatever. They can be exonerated because they have been convicted. But unless you've been convicted, you are not able to be exonerated. So that is the difference. President Trump was impeached, but he was acquitted. So take that frame of mind and go with it. So thank you very much for watching. We've enjoyed our feisty time here tonight, and we know that Jamie will come back to us. Good night, and watch us next time.